Today, I'd like to continue our exploration of the Buddhist and Christian understanding of joy, understanding of happiness. One experience that the Dalai Lama had in terms of following his Buddhist teachings was to reflect on the idea of becoming a refugee. The Dalai Lama had to leave his home in Tibet. The Chinese were coming in and taking over, and he wanted a certain independence for Tibet, independence for the Buddhist approach, and the Chinese were, of course, trying to take over and impose their way of doing things on the Dalai Lama and on Tibet. So the Dalai Lama became a refugee. He had to flee to India, was accepted into India, and given a special place to live, and really built up a beautiful center for Buddhism in India. Uh, but the Dalai Lama, reflecting on that experience, uh, said that since he became a refugee, he's been liberated from the prison of formality. So even though he was a refugee, and we think of refugees as people who would obviously miss their homeland, they would miss their surroundings. Very difficult, very challenging, obviously, to be a refugee. And the Dalai Lama said, but part of that experience of being a refugee involved a liberation. And it was a liberation from a prison. And he felt it was the prison of formality. We all have certain prisons that we live in, things that limit our ability to love others, that restrict us. And one of the prisons that the Dalai Lama felt he was in when he was in Tibet was that prison of formality, the rigidity of a certain role that he had to play in a certain structure. And when that structure was taken away, it could have been a traumatic experience for the Dalai Lama. It could have been a terrible thing. But he took a different perspective on it. And he said, really, it was a liberation. Because as the Dalai Lama, in that role, you're surrounded by certain rituals that you have to do in a certain way. And he said, well, now I don't have that. I've been liberated from that role, and I can take on a different role. And actually, it became for the Dalai Lama uh, a much more universal role than the role that he was limited to. So it became a liberation for him. Many scientists look at that time about birth and say there are a number of weeks when the mother's physical touch is the key factor in developing the brain properly. So the idea that the mother has this intimate relationship can help the brain to develop in the right way is very important. And that is really a key to developing the human person. The simple reality of the touch of the mother. Uh, Tali Baram, who's a neurologist and a neuroscientist and has spent some time studying the brain, said a mother's caress triggers an activity that improves cognition and resilience, and a definite resilience to stress in the baby's developing brain. The mother's touch could literally prevent the release of stress hormones that have been shown to lead to the disintegration of dendritic spines, which are branch-like structures on the neurons that are important to the sending and receiving of messages and the encoding of memory. So it's interesting looking at it just from that perspective, the perspective of the brain and neurology, how the brain develops. And the importance of the mother's caress, feeling the mother close to the child, feeling that intimacy, actually helps in the development of the brain of the child by relieving this stress. And the stress that is relieved really has an effect throughout the entire body in terms of these messages that are sent and that are encoded in the person. And these memories are so important and so significant in the life of the child. So it shows the importance of touch, the importance of intimacy at this early age in terms of very basic development. We need really, our Buddhist friends would tell us, we need an unbiased love toward entire humanity, entire sentient beings, irrespective of what their attitude is towards us. So our love for them should not be based on how they treat us. Our love should come out from us, just as the mother's caress comes to the child and helps the child develop. Our love that we give as gift to someone helps that person develop and mature and become a full human person. Our enemies, those who would oppose us and criticize us, our Buddhist friends would tell us that those enemies are still human brothers and sisters. So, on that level, as fellow humans, they deserve our love, our respect, and our affection. So, this concept of loving enemies has a positive effect, not only on the enemy, but obviously on us who do the loving. Because as we love our enemy, our ability to love others grows and expands, and we become fuller persons ourselves. A very challenging teaching, and a teaching that's also reflected in our Christian scriptures. When Jesus says, well, if you love somebody who loves you, what's the big deal? Come on, they love you anyway. But if you love someone who resists you and criticizes you, then you are truly giving a gift to that person because you're overcoming their hatred by your gift of love. So not only are they growing as a person, you are growing as a person as well. So we have a great example of how the Buddhist teaching and our Christian teaching are joined together as one. The importance of loving our enemies.